What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. I am just hopping in here to let you guys know there's some video choppiness on the guest's end for this video, but it doesn't take away from what he's saying or the story that he's sharing. So without further ado, let's hop into this interview episode with Chaz.
There's a force in all of us that science knows nothing about, the force of fear.
Welcome, everyone, to Induced Fear. I'm your host, Oscar, and with me, it's been almost a year since he's been on
just
last.
about.
Yeah, Chaz here. How you been, man?
Awesome. Glad to be here. Glad to be back and diving into some more weird stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's been almost a year. You came on to promote your book and then teach me all of that, which was awesome.
Yeah. The friendship case. That was
yes.
that was. I think it was more than a year ago. It was almost. I think we might be nearing 2 years on the last time
I think
we
so.
chatted
Yeah.
about that. Because I know that the book came out 2 years ago, so it was probably around that time.
Yeah. I think we had it released it was 2 years because it was December 20th, 2020.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I'm offended I haven't been asked back sooner.
I know. Sorry, man. I wasn't
Nah,
even consistent. Those first that first year was like the most
Mhm.
inconsistent I was ever for the
Oh
show.
yeah. Well, everyone, I'm fortunate that um, I write, so the project isn't continuous. It doesn't have to be,
Yeah.
updated every. Well, it does and it doesn't though. It doesn't have to be consistently updated every week.
Yeah, I feel you.
People aren't looking over my shoulder saying, where's the content? Give me the content." They
Yeah.
understand they got to wait a little while.
Yeah, but you're also now a contributor at Paranormality magazine, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm contributing, editing,
There
scouting
you go.
talent and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, got a big role over there at Paranormality magazine. Monthly writings and uh, stories covering all kinds of weird stuff from strange cases around the globe, but also personalities and people behind the paranormal, whether it's
Yeah.
podcasting to investigators to artists.
Yeah, you guys
Yeah.
got an awesome team over there.
Mm-hmm. And we're working on some great projects. I mean, we've got Nick over in California Creepypasta, who's doing some great stuff. He'll be popping up on TV here and there. Keep an eye out for that. Aaron
Oh,
with Hey
dope.
Strangeness, he's doing some great stuff. No, it's an awesome team, and I'm glad to be part of it. Yeah, and they actually were the ones who are publishing this new book that I've written, A Place Between Time and Space. And we're of course you can buy it through Amazon, but you can get your Bezos free copies, as we're calling them, directly through Paranormality magazine. So they've been great in supporting independent paranormal content creators, whether it's writers or streamers or podcasters. So yeah, if you guys like any of that stuff, go check them out. They're a worthy publication to support. And we're opening actually this month to submissions. If you have an article or a story you want to share, send it to us, and it might be in the next month's issue.
Hell yeah. Yeah, you guys got a lot going on. It's not just like writing articles, because I see you pop up
Mhm.
in videos like reacting to things like
Oh yeah, no,
the like that pale
we're
creature video.
yeah, that one actually surprising how many people reacted to that. It's one of those funny things in paranormal, but also social media. That video, it went viral, it blew up on Twitter, and everyone comments on the video is like, "Oh, it looks so fake," and it's absolutely ridiculous. And then I have this video that was originally on TikTok of me reacting to it, saying the same thing, because it does. It looks like a
Yeah.
guy in a morph suit just like twerking through his lawn.
Yeah.
It's not a convincing video. But when they posted that video, all of the comments are the opposite. They're like, no, it's definitely real. This guy's
That's
an
how it always
asshole.
goes. Yeah.
Right? Always. It's always how it is. They'll just say the opposite of
Yeah.
whatever's in the video. But no,
Also, I
it's
just feel like people on the internet are gullible sometimes.
mm,
Like they fall for
well, yeah,
anything. Yeah.
people want to believe, and you
Yeah.
can't really knock them for that. But it does make doing the actual research and investigation and that aspect of it makes it a little more difficult sometimes than it should be.
Yeah. So why don't we jump
Yeah,
into what you're here to talk about? What you wanted to.
absolutely. Um, so yeah, it's that new book, A Place Between Time and Space, and so this is a case that I've been working on over the last year, and it's something that kind of fell in my lap. The friendship case was in Chile, and I had grand plans to do some traveling to different places. Um, I was planning to travel to Russia, but after the end of that book, but obviously things have changed where that's
Yeah.
not feasible.
That's a big
And
no-go
I
right
kind of
now.
yeah, it's gonna be a little rough. That might be a later years of my life book. I'll have to write. Give it a couple decades to cool down. Um,
Yeah.
but uh, I kind of found myself stuck stateside with the pandemic and all kinds of travel restrictions and things like that. And so I decided to do a cross country kind of road trip, visiting paranormal locations, leaving from Florida, where I am initially, where I'm from, and where I'm at now. And so we did this cross country road trip all the way to California, through the South, through Texas and the desert, stopping off at paranormal locations and conducting, weird psychedelic experiments and things like that. But one of the first locations we tried to find was the Neff House / Betz Castle. Um,
All right.
and this place is a famous location because of the Betz case. And the Betz case was a UFO case that occurred in 1974. It was on Fort George Island, just north of Jacksonville, Florida, where this family who lived on the island discovered this sphere, this big metal sphere. And the adult son, Terry, um, there's several versions of the story. Some versions say he found it inside of a fire, like there was a bush fire, and this was in the center of it. Others, it was just a patch of burnt grass around it.
Hmm.
But supposedly he found this sphere and brought it home, thinking it was a historical artifact, maybe a cannonball or something like that, because the island has this long, long history, which we'll get into. But he brings it home, and for 2 weeks, it just sits in his room as a mundane metal sphere. And one day he's playing guitar in his room, and the sphere starts to vibrate and hum. This metallic sound starts coming from it, and
Hmm.
soon after it starts to roll around and move on its own. And it's not just bouncing off the walls, rolling around like a Roomba. It moves with this intelligence. It seems to follow people around the house and things like that. And so the family thinks this is fascinating, this is weird, and tells their neighbors. And soon the neighbors tell their friends, and it becomes this local story where the local TV stations are showing up. There's a witness, Ron Kravitz. He was at the time the late night paranormal radio guy. Back when it
All
was
right.
terrestrial radio. He did the local Jacksonville coast to coast show. And so he went out to investigate this sphere, and he recalled seeing it. It was in the center of this table, and they were going to go outside and take pictures of the house because this house is bizarre, and he wanted to get more pictures of it. And the sphere saw them leaving, going out the back door, and it rolled to the edge of the table and kind of dangled off the edge and wobbled there a little bit, as if to say, "Hey, don't forget about me. Like, I want to go
Yeah.
outside, like a pet cat or a dog would almost." And yeah, to this day he recalls that incident. Um, and so the story from there soon blew up to national press. Investigators like J. Allen Hynek got involved. The father of modern ufology.
Yeah.
He investigated the sphere actually on 3 separate occasions, had it tested at different labs, and even went to the home to investigate it there. The Navy got involved. So just south of Mayport or Fort George Island is Mayport Naval Station, and there they showed some interest in this strange sphere. And over the course of this next month, the story hit national fame, and then like a lot of UFO stories, a debunking comes out. They claim that the sphere is, it's just a normal metal ball. It comes from this valve pump that they used at paper mills, and it must have been like a old piece from an old paper mill. And they even found a sphere that kind of looked like it. And this was bolstered by the Navy, who released privately, they told the family that there's something inside that sphere. There definitely is some weird mechanism on the inside. But when Jerry Betz, the matriarch of the family, refused to turn the sphere over to them permanently, they released to the media this other letter saying, yeah, no, it's fake. There's nothing on the inside. We x-rayed it. It's a hollow ball. Nothing to see here. Everybody go home. And at this time, at the end of the spring when this story was occurring, Jerry Betz was like, okay, cool, I'm done with it. And she was really willing to accept this debunking because it kind of had ruined her life. She was a very prominent businesswoman, and being the 70s, it was tough being a woman, period. And even much more so in a business environment. And she was in some tough
Yeah.
businesses. She had a trucking company and a real estate company. Again, very male dominated industries, and she was competitive and successful in them. And so she had these businesses she was running. She ran for state Congress, and there was even like a super sexist newspaper article about it that said, how will these women keep house if they're elected? It's really, tough.
Very cool.
Right. She was a badass lady, to put it shortly. And I say
Yeah.
was, she's still around, but she doesn't talk about the sphere.
Mm.
She's not interested in it. She's lived a long, storied life, and this sphere is just a blip in it. You can actually go and buy paintings from her. She has a website, and she does some paintings that are pretty great. Vistas of like Florida swamps and things. Cool stuff. But don't harass her about the sphere. She's not about it. But this so at the end of this month, she her businesses were suffering. Her phone was nonstop ringing with people asking about the UFO. People were showing up at her house at all hours of the night, knocking and said, hey, where's the sphere? I'm here to see the sphere. And so when this debunking came out, she was like, cool, we'll roll with it. And privately, she told people close to the family that during this time period, the sphere had been altered. The family was under the suspicion that someone had done something to it, whether it was the Navy when they were experimenting on it, or J. Allen Hynek. There was some suspicion fell on him that he may have even swapped the sphere out and stole it, replaced it with a fake one. Um,
Wow.
there's several different theories about what happened to the sphere, but it seems like it was altered in some way. And as regards to where it is now, a close anonymous member of the family has claimed that they gave it to someone for safekeeping. So that was the Betz sphere case, and pretty interesting. But it's not really
No,
a high
yeah.
strange, and it's bizarre, but it's not super high strangeness. There's no aliens walking around. There's no super bizarre circumstances. So I thought, right? I thought that it was going to be a typical weird UFO case. And so when I heard about it, I was like, well, I want to go out to this island and see where it happened. And well, let me see where's the house they lived in. And that's when I discovered that there was a separate paranormal case, entirely disconnected to the Betz
Hmm.
case, but occurring in the exact same home where the Betz family lived. And much like through history, the ghost hunters and the UFO guys, they're not communicating. The Bigfoot guys are out in the woods. They're not talking to
Yeah.
anyone. They're, it's kind of these niches and
Yeah.
that existed separately. But yeah, there was this whole other, digital archive of poltergeist and ghostly phenomenon tied to what was called the Neff House. And that was the name of the Betz Castle before the Betz family moved in.
Oh,
Um,
so that's why. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but so that's why the stories didn't seem connected because they went by
mhm.
like at two different names at
Two
that point.
different names entirely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, "Where's the?" And that's why on that road trip, it was one of the first stops leaving Florida. I couldn't find the house. I asked around. I asked the Park Service. There's a bunch of historical landmarks on the island, including Kingsley Plantation, where they've still got the plantation houses maintained and stuff like that. I went there and asked, and I was like, "Where's the Betz house?" And they're like, "The Betz house? I'm not sure. Is it this one over here?" And I was like, "No, maybe it's the Neff house." And there's another house on the island. I think it's called the Nep with a P, or there's like a PH something that sounds
Hmm.
very similar. So they sent me to that house. And that one's not part of the park. It's a private residence. So I couldn't ask anyone there. And so I kind of, drove up and down this island looking for this house and couldn't find it. Um, and so on my way back, I had found some satellite images, used some Google Earth to find the roof of the house. And from there, I was able to track how which trails lead into the woods and which ones to follow, which lead where. And had to cross a little no trespassing sign to actually get into the area of the woods where this house is. Um, Now it's all on government land, so it's no trespassing. But God damn it, my dollars pay for it, so I'm gonna go check it out. I own this kind of.
Yeah, yeah, I paid for
Um,
it.
right. It's not like, again, I'm not condoning trespassing in those, in Florida. No, it's a stand your ground state. So if you're going on private
Mm,
land trespassing, it has a potential death sentence. So keep that in mind. But this was on government land, so a little bit of a different story. And I like to consider what I do journalism, and so yeah, I crossed that barrier and went to this house. And when I was there, it struck me. It was I go to a lot of haunted locations. I hear a lot of spooky stories. And very few places really have that tangible feel about it. That
hmm.
the kids are calling it a liminal space these days, but where it just
Yeah.
you walk up on it and it's off, it's bizarre, it's unnerving in some kind of way. And even my partner Kim, she's skeptical. She doesn't really believe in these kind of things. She's open-minded, but she doesn't believe in ghosts and aliens and UFOs and things. She was unnerved by this house, and she wouldn't go further in than just the front room. Um, and so it's a bizarre house. When you walk up on it, it sits on top of Mount Cornelia, which Mount's a little bit of a misnomer. It's a hill. But it's Florida. We don't have a lot of hills. And it is the largest
Yeah.
hill in Duval County. So it is the tallest point in the area this house is built on. And it's this Tudor style stone and wood, brown and white wood, um, castle. It really does look like a castle. The entrance is this 3-story tall conical tower. To the left is this great hall with a large fireplace that leads out to this like sunroom that leads to the back. All of this is boarded up and covered in shutters and stuff now. Um, then it's got all kinds of different. It's a 3-story home with a basement. Again, something unusual in Florida, but it also has 17 different levels. There's all kinds of step ups and step downs and like weird platforms, doors in the middle of walls 6 feet off the ground with no steps, these weird shifting
Hmm.
hallways that are higher and lower. It's kind of like a miniature
Winchester.
Winchester. Yeah, it's almost in
Yeah.
this strange way of miniature Winchester home. Nowhere nearly as massive on a scale, but it's got that bizarreness about the architecture. And
Hmm.
so it was designed that way intentionally. It was built by by Melvin Greeley. He was the architect, and he called it his most unique home. And the man who commissioned it, he was named Nettleton Neff, and he was a railroad engineer that worked his way up to executive, based out of Chicago. And he vacationed in Jacksonville, and he was a member of this Ribault Club, which sits on Fort George Island. It was, and at the time in the 20s, it was, you know, the Gilded Age, Gatsby time, and Fort George Island was the hangout for Jacksonville's rich elite. There was a golf course, there was this Ribault Club. It's where everyone kind of hang out. It was the fancy place. And Melvin Greeley built this Ribault Club. He was the architect, and he was the dean of Jacksonville architects. His buildings are still landmarks across the city. And Nettleton Neff was a member at this club as well. And he had purchased the plot of land where Mount Cornelia was and wanted to build this home. And Neff had these rough drawings and said, "This is what I want built." And Greeley drew up those drawings. He made real blueprints for them. But he was inspired by the drawings and inspired by Mount Cornelia, the location. And so he drew this separate set of drawings that, you know, was pure inspiration. And that was the house that ended up being built. When Neff saw that house, he was like, "That's the one. Yes, build that. Put it on that hill." Um, and so this house was constructed. But tragedy struck the Neff family, like all ghost stories, right? Based
Yeah.
around a tragedy. And they never moved into the house. First, there was Nettleton's wife. She died in a fire at one of their other properties in Michigan, a fire that the newspapers called mysterious. Then their adult son disappeared. He was attending Harvard. He vanished for 2 weeks, and then they found him dead in an apple orchard. Um, and finally, Nettleton Neff followed suit. He killed himself sitting in his office in Chicago. Um, and the house was completed right before all of these things occurred. Their boxes were moved into the house, but none of the family ever actually moved in, stayed in the home. And so
Wow.
right around this time was also when the house was finished. It was commissioned in, I believe, 28. It was finished in 1932. The Great Depression hit, and this fancy smancy Reebok club, the golf course, all of that gone in the matter of a couple years. When you go to the island today, you could never imagine it's such thick forest and swamp. You would never imagine there was a golf course there. But if you walk the trails every once in a while, you'll find a patch of white sand, this like really sandy area, and that's where the traps used to be. The Reebok Club still stands. It has a little museum on the inside. People still rent it out for weddings and things like that. Um, but it's nowhere near. When you visit, it's beautiful. It's elegant. Really, a large Southern kind of ballroom design, colonial. It's got pillars and grand oaks, but it's clearly not the Gilded Aged party. It's a good reasonable, like I could have my wedding there, you know, and I'm a
Yeah,
paranormal
yeah,
investigator. I don't make a lot of money, you know, I could
yeah.
have a very nice, it would be a beautiful place for a wedding, but it's, you know, it's not that fancy area it used to be. Um, but the house sat on this hill as the forest grew and the golf course disappeared, and local people saw this castle sitting up there, and ghost stories began. People started to see lights. They started to hear music and telephones ringing out from this empty house. And it sat empty for decades until in the early 70s, Jerry Betz heard about it and was like sold. There's a weird, big old spooky castle in Fort George Island. You know, she had a real estate company. She was like, done, I'm in. Let's buy it. I'm moving in. I'm going to renovate it. I'm going to fix it up. And she did. She added a wing to the house. She added another tower. And it really, she was made it a home. And she was the last person to live in the house as well. Once the family moved out, the sphere left, potentially. And the house sat empty again. And the Park Service used it for a little while. It was used as like a base for some archaeological projects for a little bit, but never had a new owner. And all the while, the ghost stories returned. You know, it's still a place where like people go out and bet each other whether to, you know, go inside and see what's going on. The spray paint and the graffiti on the inside is real spooky stuff. There's, you know, satanic sacrifice here. You got your classic pentagrams. But there's another
Yeah.
guy who has done a really clever, like, weird time travel, like data log, date, number, something's following me, spray painted onto the wall in these like clever little passages. It's
Whoa.
a place that inspires weird shit. It really does.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, the ghost stories, people might hear that and say, well, the ghost stories were made up. Well, you know, no one died in the house. You know, so oh, they just made a spooky house on the hill. These ghost stories just popped up. But when I started researching this project deeper, ghost stories on Fort George Island had been around much, much longer than this house had even existed. Back in the days when it was a plantation, there started the legend of Old Red Eyes, who was a slave that killed other slaves and was, you know, killed for it as retribution. And
Shit.
yeah, well, it was a story I first read, and I was like, "This sounds like some white guilt, like a
Yeah.
smoke screen thrown over it." Like, no, the slaves lynched this guy. We swear it wasn't us. But I actually got
Jeez.
into the research at Kingsley Plantation, and Zephaniah Kingsley, the guy who ran it, he was a weird dude. He converted to this weird Senegalese tradition. People who visited at his home, his dining hall was filled with portraits of naked black women, like these huge portraits, like all covering the walls. He had several wives. One of them, Anna Kingsley. They were all black women who he had purchased, and one of them, Anna Kingsley, she helped run the entire operation. She had her own plantation, and she would manage things as well. And he was of the belief that mixed race people were superior to white people and black people. That the mixed race person was the most superior, which again, very controversial viewpoint in the
Yeah.
1800s. Not He was not popular amongst the other plantation owners in the area. But he did have this model where, you know, slaves, they had working hours, and then afterwards they were free to, you know, have their own craft, sell fish, do whatever they want. And he would even allow them to buy their freedom from him. If you could like make enough money on your side job, you could buy your freedom from Zephaniah. And not to say he was a good guy. He was also involved in a lot of shady, illegal shit.
Yeah.
You know, he was around when Florida was first a Spanish colony, and so the Spanish system of slavery was one where basically the lighter your skin was, the more rights you had, and so that kind of vibed well with his system, you know, where he was married to a bunch of black women. He had a bunch of half black, half white kids that he thought were the master race. And so he was giving them all these property and stuff like that. And then when the U.S. purchased Florida, suddenly all of his kids and all of their stuff, that system was gone. They had no more of their rights. They were as, treated equal as the other slaves. And to him, this was abhorrent. He thought this was ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so he was a weird dude, but he was also still bringing slaves in after the Atlantic trade was banned. There's a really interesting footnote in history where this illegal smuggler ship shows up outside of Jacksonville. The U.S. Navy catches it, and it's filled with like 300 slaves from Africa. And that's illegal. You can trade slaves inside the states. You can, if they have kids, you can sell those kids as slaves, but you can't bring in any new ones. But the Navy stops them, and it's 300 people. The Navy has no, barracks enough. They have no space. They have no food, provisions for all these people. So they're like, well, where were you going? Like, tell us where you were going. Well, Kingsley Plantation. So they take them to Kingsley Plantation, and they tell Zephaniah Kingsley, hey, don't do this again. You can have these slaves. We'll let you have these 300 because we don't have food and space and stuff for them, and you do. But next time, if we catch you doing this again, there's going to be trouble. They really gave him the literal slap on the wrist. So
Yeah.
he was a weird dude. I think is the root of it. Complicated morality on that guy. But that the fact that he was so strange in his racial views means that story of Old Red Eyes might actually be true as it's told. He wasn't one who believed in policing his slaves. He allowed them to have their own community, rituals and practices. He wasn't a Christian. He didn't believe in Christianity. He thought it was a waste of time for his slaves to be converted to Christianity. And so the island did have all of these weird, occult, strange traditions that melded from not only the African traditions that were, following these slaves over, but from Native American traditions, the Seminoles who were being used as slaves at that time. And even prior to the plantation, the island was occupied for thousands of years by the Timucuan tribe. When you drive through it today, you will right along the road, you're driving past these oyster shell middens, these mounds that are left over and literally just cut straight through to put a road. And so it has all of these bizarre different practices that kind of melded on these islands and these weird ghost stories that followed. And so this haunting pair of red eyes that's attributed to this serial killer slave. There's the ghost of Anna Kingsley is reportedly seen at the plantation, walking the halls and the grounds. Your classic woman in a white dress kind of archetype
Yeah.
of a ghost. There's a ghostly peacock. People have seen black dogs, again, with those red eyes. And so for hundreds of years, the island had ghost stories. And when this house was built, it almost acted as a focal point. It kind of the ghost stories kind of moved into this empty house, as it were. And again, there's all kinds of strange occult ideas behind that. That hill being the tallest point, it was almost definitely used for some significance to the native tribes. And again, if these African religions were being practiced as well, it could have also had significance amongst the slave populations of the island. Because of all of the other oyster shell middens, there's a good possibility that Mount Cornelius itself is partially constructed. It may have been artificially made higher by these tribes. It could be the old cliche of built on an Indian burial.
Yeah.
Again, it fits all of these ghostly, bizarre archetypes, and so it's no wonder that people have been seeing stuff there
Yeah.
for hundreds of years. And so for me, it was really bizarre that you have all of these ghost cases, and this Neff house is one of them on this island. And it just so happens that this Neff house also is the same house where this UFO sphere popped up and moved around on its own inside this home for the bulk of the sightings. It seemed like a pretty bizarre coincidence. Um, but then there was another coincidence I stumbled upon that really convinced me, like, no, there's a full story here that people haven't heard and don't know about. And it's not just a story that's kind of interesting. It's a story that's very relevant. What I next stumbled upon, which was pretty weird, was some really current new information, information that everyone knows about. So it wasn't really a stumble. It was kind of more a smack in the face. And it has to do with those famous Navy UFO videos, the 3 that were released in 2019. There's the famous 2004 David Fravor Tic Tac UFO that
Yeah.
is, goes in and out of the water. And then there's the gimbal, which has kind of become the face of these videos. It's that black saucer that rotates. It's really
Yeah.
bizarre looking. But the third video, which was filmed the same day as the gimbal video and by the same crew, what is the Go Fast video. And in that video, it shows a big metal sphere right above the water, and it's hauling ass. What's never discussed and there's been a lot of discussion about these videos, debate whether they're real, what does it mean, what kind of technology is it aliens, is it Russia, is it China, is it us lying, is it the Air Force lying to the Navy, who's lying to who? In all of these discussions, no one's brought up this super interesting point that where those 2 videos were filmed, where this sphere is filmed, it was by a training mission being run off the USS Roosevelt, which at that time was stationed at Mayport Station outside of Jacksonville. That video where that sphere is hauling ass, it's hauling ass in the direction towards Fort George Island. It's being filmed only a few miles from where 40 years ago the Navy investigated a metal sphere that moved on its own and moved around, hands on. And
Yeah.
so that was super intriguing. The fact that this is localized, they're filming one of these spheres where there is a history of this phenomenon. And so then I looked deeper into Mayport Naval Station and found that this naval station had some prior incidents with UFOs. And this was something that J. Allen Hynek at the time, when he was investigating the case, he didn't know. None of the other newspapers, investigators, nobody knew about this at the time. But a few years prior to the Betz sphere showing up, there was a UFO flyover at Mayport Station. And it wasn't just, some night watchman saw a UFO. It hovered over the station. Fighter jets were scrambled. The people who saw it got the conversation like, hey, you can't tell anyone about this. Shut your mouths. You didn't see anything. The classic military shutdown. And
Yeah.
in between the Betz case and the filming of these, the Go Fast and the gimbal, there was another incident where this station was buzzed by a UFO. So this naval station has had a long history of interacting with this phenomenon and interacting up close and personal with it. And when you consider that, the filming of those videos that day and at that location starts to seem pretty suspicious. And I don't
Yeah.
know what I mean when I say suspicious. I'm not saying maybe they it's them, or I'm not saying what it is, but I'm saying it probably means they know a little something more than they're letting on.
Yeah.
And
Possible connections.
right. And so a lot of people, of course, the military, I think everyone believes the government is lying about UFOs to some degree, right? That's not a big world shaker. But when we consider that they just happen to be filming these videos at this location and they're releasing this piece of information, it seems that, and we know for a fact that there's other videos out there that are still censored, that aren't being showed.
Yeah.
This one, the Navy seems pretty comfortable with. They're comfortable with showing us this sphere. And I think that becomes interesting when we consider this new old information that this location has a history of these spheres, and this naval base, this where this was recorded, has a history of interacting with these spheres. And so that was the kicker, where I was like, okay, well, someone needs to tell this story in its entirety. You know, there's so many other elements when it comes to, and of course, researching further, dozens of ghost stories, dozens of UFO stories and entity encounters. There's cryptids. There's the St. John's River monster. He's sometimes called Pinky, sometimes called Johnny, depending on which part of the St. John's River you're on. But it's your classic kind of plesiosaur, you know, lake monster, river monster. But the first documented sighting was in the 1800s, right outside of Fort George Island, like right outside, next to the beach. This guy's describing it, saying it's essentially coming off the island at them. And there are USOs seen in these waters too. These strange lights glowing under the water, shooting out into the sky. It seems to be a focal point of this high strangeness, and a lot of it around spherical lights and things like that. And so that combined with me going to the location and it really genuinely being bizarre, being a freaky place. And it was. I investigated several times, and I remember on it was either the third or the fourth time, I'm inside the house, I'm walking around, and this time I'm live streaming it to one of my colleagues at the magazine. And we're looking around this house, and we're looking around, and for the first time, I noticed this doorway. It's sitting 6 feet up in the middle of this wall. There's no steps up to it, but it's a pair of grand double doors. And I've walked through this hallway 7 or 8 times at this point. I've been in the house. I've been looking around. And you do have to be careful. You're looking at your feet. You're dodging missing floorboards and things like that. But this was a big set of doors. It was really obviously there. It's impossible now looking back that I couldn't have seen it. And so on these grand double doors, they're cracked open, which I think maybe they were closed the last couple times, and that's why I kind of didn't notice it. But it was cracked open, and there was this fuzzy carpet kind of hanging out of the door frame a little bit, and kind of caught your attention as you were walking past. And so the house, it's filled with these weird tricks and these weird places. And even before the Betz family lived there, people were talking about hidden passageways and secrets. There was one guy in an old newspaper article, Jerry Betz was talking about how someone told her that she could find the entrance to the secret passage if she went and looked through the records of the blueprints of the house. And what's very interesting is that there are blueprints of the house. Journalist Lindsay Kilbride, she did a great podcast called Oddball. It's a 5-episode documentary podcast. And she was a local journalist, and it's from that, is it real? Is it fake? Was this a hoax? Like, what happened kind of perspective, much less the paranormal perspective like I'm coming from. But she did some great job, and she uncovered a bunch of documents and, records and things like that. And the blueprints that she uncovered, there's a page missing. And I know there's a page missing because the door I just described the room I just described is not on those blueprints. And so we know that there's some bits of the information about the house that is gone. It's missing. And there are parts of the house, because of its dilapidated state, that are inaccessible. Like, there's a basement, but the way it is, you need like a little bit of like climbing equipment to get down there, and probably some pretty heavy duty boots, and because it's filled with sharp refuse and debris and stuff.
Yeah.
But being in that house and spending time in there, and I even spent a night in there as part of this long-term investigation. It's a place that really just oozes strangeness. It is one of those places where your expectations are something weird's going to happen, right? Most of the times I go to a haunted place and I'm like, every time I do it, even at the Betz house, there's that moment where you're talking to nothing in the middle of the night and you're like, well, this is ridiculous. Like, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
But that place, it doesn't have that same ridiculous feel where it really you're like, yeah, no, this something might be going on in here.
Mm,
And so I kept finding myself drawn back to the house and then going back again and again, and conducting more in-depth investigations, trying out weird technology. I got involved with this eccentric inventor investigator from the UK who believes that ghosts are actually just invisible UFO spheres, which is a very out there theory, but the perfect theory when it comes to this house in this case.
yeah.
I couldn't have created a more perfect theory myself when it came to this specific case. So I worked with some of his, I'm going to say, controversial technology, as most ghost-based technology is. It's not very convincing in some aspects, but others have had some. It's an interesting theory. Others have had bizarre, some bizarre activity. And again, I think whether or not it's a perfect theory, it represents a step forward. And I think the news story of the Betz case, where with the haunted house, with the Navy's involvement, with these other elements of high strangeness, the new Betz story does the same thing. And it's a step forward in recognizing that something is going on here that's beyond just aliens from a different planet visiting us. There's something with our reality, our physics, our consciousness, and how it interacts with reality. And inside these weird interactions, in between this dialogue, that's where this paranormal phenomenon sits. And whether it's this guy thinking UFOs, ghosts or UFOs, it's a little too far. He's taken one step and done a couple giant leaps with it. But it's still in that direction of recognizing that there is something between these phenomena. There is
Yeah.
more similarities than there are differences when it comes to discussing the paranormal as a whole. And I think the Betz case is another one. It shows that it's a capture, a snapshot of one of these cases where we can now, with the information we know, we can go back and revise it. It's not simply a ghost case or a UFO case. It is a true paranormal case. That's why I'm not even worried about, is it a hoax or anything like that. I genuinely believe Jerry Betz is telling the truth. Again, she's a businesswoman. She would have no reason to make up these lies. It's only ever hurt her business and political career. She experienced something strange on that island and in that house. And hasn't been the only one, and she won't be the only one. People who go out there will continue to experience strange things. It's not going to work like clockwork every single time, or maybe it does, and the Navy knows it. They've got it
Yeah.
timed out. But as far as we're concerned, we don't have it quite timed out like that. For general With that idea in mind, though, I did do my overnight investigation inside the house the same week that the ball started moving back in 1974, to see if, again, there are those connections through time, if these things are
Yeah.
cyclical, which they do seem to be. They do seem to pop up in certain locations on a repeated basis. What that cycle is, we can't say. I can't say with confidence. I'm sure you could find someone who's like, oh yeah, every 20 years.
Yeah.
Happens every
Yeah.
20. We all hear those kind of legends. It's part of urban mythology. Yeah, every 10 years on the date of the anniversary of the
Yeah.
death. Yeah. But there might be something to that notion. Again, it's it's a mystery, and I wish like all true paranormal books, you know I wish there was I had an alien in a bag at the end I could show everyone.
Yeah.
But I'm honest about what I uncover and what I do discover. But I gotta say, that night investigation inside that house, it was a strange night. It was a time that definitely one of the weirdest investigations I think I've ever conducted. And so with all those things intact, I thought this project was one worthwhile. Um, and so if you want all the juicy details, if you want the what happened on my investigation, the ghost stories, the UFO encounters that surround the islands, the real good details, you're gonna have to pick up the book. But if you don't want to buy a book and you found any of this interesting, I plead to you to go to the description and click the link to the change.org petition to save the Betz house. And that is the second prong, most important prong of this project, is that this house it's worth being saved. It sits in this dilapidated state. And no one at the Park Service really knows who's in charge. The national parks own the overall area, but then there's state parks within the national park. And no one in this kind of bureaucracy knows who's in charge of the house. And that's why it's sat so long and has become so dilapidated. The hall that Jerry Betz put in, the extension she added, that collapsed. It's gone now. And the rest of the house, it'll probably follow suit in a few decades if we don't get it recognized as a historic landmark and get hopefully some preservation going. It's a castle, and there's so few castles in the U.S. We got to save the ones we have. Come on. So please, if that's the only thing you do today, please sign that petition to save a piece of spooky history, so people can investigate it in the future without having to break the law. So people can appreciate the architecture. I mean, even if you don't have to save it for the spooky stuff. Save it because of the famous guy who built it. I think 4 or 5 buildings throughout Jacksonville built by him that are historic landmarks because he was one of these architects who built these unique structures. And so whether you're just a history buff or a paranormal buff, it's a worthwhile cause to go over there and put your name down so we can let the state know, let the Park Service know that this is not only a place worth saving, but a place that people will visit if it is saved, that people will go and we'll rent it overnight and investigate it. We'll hang out and do fundraisers and support it. So please, go and show out for the paranormal community, and hopefully we can get this monument recognized.
Yeah. I'll make sure I put the link down too, because I signed your petition. I didn't read anything about it because I was like, I want to hear it from you yourself.
Oh man, you just you just assumed it was good. What if we got to this point in the show and that's why I started a petition to destroy all UFO evidence. We need to burn all the documents, burn everything.
Nah, I trust you, man. I trust you, man. Even if you said destroy it, I was like, he might have a good explanation
destroy
for
it.
that.
It's a portal to hell. No, I think quite the opposite. I think these the notion of good versus evil is something I try to stay away from when I investigate the paranormal, because it really just leads to these absolutes. And when you're dealing with absolutes, you're not dealing with science anymore, right? You're saying that's evil, it's a bad thing, and so I've got to defeat it or whatever. That's totally the opposite. That's monkey brain working. That's not rational brain working.
Beat it with the rock.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Exactly. That's what labeling things evil comes from, is that instinct to attack and fear. So no, I like to when I see places like this, windows into strangeness. It's not. I'm sure you'll hear people who are like, it's a portal to hell, and some people even advertise their locations like that, like it's got a portal in the basement right to the underworld, and a demon lives in this room, and
like Bobby Mackey's or
right,
things like that.
Right, yeah. And it's fun, but it's also cheesy. Again, it's not. you're clearly spicing it up with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because how
And
many
there's
how many portals to hell does the world have at this
right,
moment? Like,
apparently all over the place.
yeah, I
Throw a
know.
rock, you'll hit 10. Um, but I think the best stories of strangeness, they speak for themselves. Like the Betz case. This is one where, man, there's a million different possible explanations. There really is no cut and dry. Well, clearly this happened. Even if your explanation is it's demons, how does that apply? Why is the sphere acting like a cat or a dog? If it's
Yeah,
a demon, it's not attacking people, it's not harming anyone, it's just wiggling, it's just rolling around with intelligence. There's clearly you know have having that biased forward investigator, and it tends to be the religious folk. I don't want to bash on anyone for their beliefs. I believe some wild and crazy stuff, as as we're getting into,
yeah,
but that that viewpoint tends to clash with a lot of um, productivity, whether in a
yeah.
lot of realms of society, but also the paranormal. And
So
so
quick for demon, so
yeah,
quick
it's
for
it's
demon or
always the
devil.
first
I mean,
knee
even
jerk
even if
reaction.
even if I like if you go in there as a religious person, like why couldn't it be angelic in some way? Why
Right.
does it have to be the worst possible thing you can think of?
Right. Well, because only if it happens through the Pope and the church is it angelic.
Yeah,
There's a monopoly on the angelic shit.
yeah.
Anything can be demonic if it makes you uncomfortable. Um, and yeah, I think that's actually a huge issue in the paranormal, this kind of rebirth of the satanic panic we're kind
Hmm.
of going through. I've been saying it on a couple shows lately that the old adage that all we need is the aliens to land on the White House lawn and introduce themselves. That's how we'll get everyone to believe. That time's coming past. No longer, because if that happened tomorrow, you'd have half the internet saying it's deep fakes. Alex
Yeah.
Jones, they're turning the frogs gay. Deep fake technology. The aliens are also gay. it's it would be wild. People would immediately be up in arms about whether it's real or not.
Yeah.
We've discovered that reality and information is malleable. It's a lot more, easy to fuck with it than we thought. There used
Yeah.
to be hard truths and things like that, and that's kind of gone by the wayside. And so it's made everything more difficult. But paranormal investigation actually has, I think, a step ahead when it comes to other fields because we've already been dealing with it for
Yep.
decades. That message isn't new here. It's where that message we thought was going to die, but it's something I think you're going to the religious, you got your ghost adventures, your semi-religious shit, that's going to be there, I think, forever in the paranormal. It's not going away anytime soon. And it was successful for that reason, because it hits that crowd that wants to think that they're going to church makes them the hero of the planet, and demons and things go and harass these people that aren't as holy, or even if they are holy, they need to, they've got some emotional thing going on. There's always those great subplots to Ghost Adventures, especially when
Yeah.
they do the home calls and they're going to someone's house, because they got to jazz it up a little bit. They don't
There's
have
always
the
an exorcism that needs to be done.
right. They don't have
Yeah.
the history to lean back against to fill in the the B-roll. They got to juice it up. That's always going to be present because there's always going to be a market for it. But just like all of history, that market's usually filled with hucksters. There's
Yeah.
I'm going to say 99% of the time, the people peddling that stuff, they might believe it, but they're still in it for dollar bills.
Yeah, there's an
Even if they
ulterior
believe
motive at
it,
the end of the day.
they're still getting a paycheck.
Yeah.
um, and so that taints all the information. And so when I investigate the paranormal, and even in my own like personal occult philosophies, I really try to replace the concepts of good versus evil with I like the Discordian view, when the Discordians were a bunch of acid heads in the 60s. But they one of their key symbols is the yin yang sign, but the dots in the middle are replaced with the pentagon, with a pentagon and with a golden apple. And the
Mm.
pentagon represents order, this innate order we see through nature, the golden ratio, these patterns, math, the order that exists in nature. The golden apple represents chaos, and that's from the Greek legend of Eris the goddess. She threw the apple into the party with all the other gods because they didn't invite her, because she's the goddess of chaos. She would have fucked it up anyways. So she fucks it up anyways. Either way, invited or not, she fucks it up by throwing this apple in the party, and it says "for the prettiest," and that leads to all the goddesses to start fighting over whether this apple belongs to who it belongs to, who is it for. And long story short, it ends with the Battle of Troy on Earth. It ends up leading to that conflict, in the as above, so below kind of way.
Yeah.
And so the golden apple represents that innate chaos. But it's the philosophy is a reminder that the overall philosophy is to remind you that chaos is not innately good or evil, and neither is order. Go back to the symbol of the pentagon. So the pentagon, it's a shape, it represents geometry, but also for American citizens in particular, it represents something very distinctly aggressive. It represents espionage and secrecy and drone
Hmm.
strikes, right? It's not a good symbol for a lot of people, no matter your political beliefs. It's certainly an area where shady shit goes down. And so it's that constant reminder that things are innately chaotic. People get struck by lightning, but there's also order. There's human beings we share genes, we grow, we develop in this predictable way. There's an order to the systems. The sun sets, the moon rises. There's an order. Every once in a while, a meteor hits a planet, though, and knocks off those systems. So there's chaos. And the investigating the paranormal through that lens, I think, has been it's been one of the reasons I think my research has been more productive, and why people have been seemingly resonating with it, and talking about it and debating it and stuff like that, because it is open to these ideas, because I haven't put a good versus evil label on it, so people are putting their filters on top of it and perceiving it in these different ways. And I think through that mixing and matching and cross hatching, we'll eventually figure out those greater truths.
Yeah.
Trial and error. That's where we're at.
No, man. This has been like the story that you just shared with me has been all around interesting, from like the convergence of cultures
Mhm.
in that area, which who knows what that kind of convergence could
I
create
know. I wish
in
there
that
was
area.
more research into it. It's one of those things where, like, I wish there was an anthropologist back then, like someone who was
Yeah.
taking notes, because it must have been strange. Well, we only know how strange it is from Zephaniah Kingsley's perspective, because he was the only, white dude taking notes.
Yeah.
He was sitting there writing about all these details. And so he only wrote about it from his perspective. And so, of course, it's going to sound a certain way
Yeah.
compared to the actual truth. And so I don't know. It's just a bizarre place and a bizarre story. And thanks for letting me come on and share it.
Yeah, of course, man. I mean, it's always insightful when we have you speak. I mean, we've talked on a episode of Cryptocasters about high
Yeah,
strangeness before. So I know how big you are into those high strangeness areas where it's not just one thing for you to focus on.
right. Oh yeah, I think it's again, it's something that is being realized by a lot more investigators, even some of the more traditional investigators. I'm a plug of some friends real quick.
Yeah.
Stacy Brown and RPG, they're Bigfoot guys. You've seen them on some Bigfoot TV shows potentially. Um, but they've got a new project out where they teamed up with a Florida-based paranormal team, Outcast Paranormal, and they've done this new docu series, the Skunk Ape Experiments, where they're really doing some cutting edge psychedelic stuff. They're testing out some weird technology, some of the same stuff I used in my investigations at the Betz house. They used in relation to these Bigfoot cases, but they're looking at it and they they used all these techniques, and very much like I did at the start of my research. I had my Ouija board mushroom experiences that led to seeing UFOs. They were doing these weird experiments to try to interact with the Bigfoot, and they started getting super bizarre phenomenon, totally left of field. Not Bigfoot stuff, but ghost stuff, UFO stuff, animals acting in super strange ways, and things like that. So that's another great project, the Skunk Ape Experiments. I think you can get it on Amazon Prime, where again, this cutting edge stuff. It's the paradigm is shifting, I think, in the paranormal, where we're, this current era of investigators, we have access to the vast pool of information that
Yeah.
is the internet. And the internet's got a lot of cons. It's caused a lot of strife. But when it comes to investigating the paranormal, it is still hands down the greatest tool. I mean, I've been able to look at this Betz case and find relevant UFO cases that J. Allen Hynek, one of the best investigators ever to research the field, no idea about this information just because the databases weren't there.
Yeah.
The pools of information weren't there. And so with this resource and with this tool, it's forced a lot of people to recognize the shit that, we've been talking about for a while now, that there is an overall phenomenon. There's something going on, and it doesn't have to do just with aliens and with dead Civil War soldiers and with lost hominid creatures in the woods. Those things certainly are part of it. But the main thing, it has something to do with our consciousness, with our reality, and how those two things interact. And somewhere in the fabric of quantum mechanics and unknown physics, there is an understanding that's waiting for us to try to reach. And just like it takes scientists in a lab doing research, I kind of like the analogy of we're currently the alchemists of an unknown chemistry, where we're the dudes getting high on fumes in the dungeons of castles, mixing weird sludges and substances
Yeah.
together, making up crazy words. But one day, those crazy words are going to be the periodic table. They're going to be the framework of understanding of how we deal with our reality. And so, that's I got I enjoy it. I love huffing the fumes. I love mixing the sludges. And I love getting out there and researching these subjects. And I know in 100 years they'll probably laugh and do weird podcasts about my books and be like, "What a weirdo this dude was." But that's the idea. That's the goal, because from those conversations will lead to the next conversations that will lead to the next and the next, and finally, perhaps some higher understanding.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I appreciate about your way of investigating. I think a lot of people are afraid to dive into certain areas. They want to just
Mm-hmm.
focus in one spot. If they think
Mm-hmm.
it's
Oh, you got to
something,
find your niche. Yeah.
yeah. But like you go from being afraid to go into these different areas, and then also people are also afraid to ask questions about certain
Mm-hmm.
things. And you're just like, well, there are these weird ghost things happening, but there's also this weird sphere thing happening
Mhm.
in this area. Um, why is nobody questioning this? Why is nobody asking this type of question?
Yeah, and there is that's one thing I'm still a little miffed about the community is um, there's because the internet's such a great tool, you have a lot of armchair research, and the armchair research is super valuable. It's needed. It's impossible to process all this information as an individual without it. But you do have a little bit of a lack of field research. It's kind of
Yeah.
seen as
I
a
just went on a rant
secondary
about
thing,
that in my last episode. So
right?
like so
For
I
a lot of
understand.
people, it's a content creating like expedition, and then that's kind of it. And you know, I it's fun. It is fun to do. It's fun to share. It's fun to go out there and spook yourself out and be with friends and get spooked out. Um, but you do have that like niche building, like, oh, I'm a ghost hunter, so I'm going on these ghost hunts, or I'm, a UFO guy, so I've got to go to Roswell and film a video
Mhm.
diary there, and the content gets real boring real fast, and it's the same locations and the same stories over and over and over. And there is a good thing about that. You do have different angles, different viewpoints, different little bits of information. Um,
Plus, it keeps the story alive.
it
You
keeps
know.
it alive, absolutely. But it also tends to become this weird capitalist thing. Like I think Bobby Mackey's is a perfect example because everyone knows that place, but man, why?
Yeah.
Like it's just a bar, it's a music gig in a like strip mall. It's not even a like historic location. It's not the best. I'm just gonna say that it's not the
Yeah.
best. And people, I've seen it. It's like at the top of, oh, I really want to investigate there, and I'm like, man, like you can just hang out in a bar. Like there's no, you don't have to go spend however much money they rent it out for the night. It's a bizarre, um, you know, some of them are, I guess I'm trying to say, some of them are being kept alive a little too much. Some of
Yeah,
them
yeah.
could die, and others could have a little more attention paid. And I think the Betz house is a perfect example of that, where it's so forgotten that people don't even know where it is. No one, is visiting it, even though it's phenomenally strange. It's not one of these ones that are kind of reaching. It's literally the backdrop of several bizarre stories. Um, and no exaggeration, embellishment needed. So it's a double-edged sword. And so when I was doing this project, there was, I reached out to a lot of investigators, like, hey, come to this house with me. Let's like do this investigation. And a lot of them, they went and they asked the state and tried to get permission, even some TV crews and stuff. And all of them got shut down, and that was it. They were not in. Oh no, well, they said no, so we're not going. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? I told you they were going to say no. I've already asked.
Yeah.
You knew they were going to say no, and so it's one of those things. Well, we can't do it. They don't want to attach their names to any of the projects that are uncomfortable. Similar to when I went to Chile, went to a Nazi compound and had to do some snooping around.
Oh
you
yeah,
know
I remember
it's
that. Yeah.
it's research where, yeah, it's uncomfortable and it's dangerous and it's a little weird, but isn't that what we're investigating for? Weren't you interested in the phenomenon because it's scary? Right? Aren't we going on these? That's the origin of all of this. Even for me, is I like scary movies, I like scary stories, I like getting
Yeah.
creeped out in the middle of the night. I always have since I was a kid. And so that's how you get into investigating. And so for me, when something is creepy, spooky, uncomfortable, I go at it, like, let's do it. That makes it more intriguing. That's an adventure I'm in. And a lot of it is people want to film segments and then like have this post production that looks like an adventure at the end, that they can share on TikTok, which
Yeah.
I want to do that too. I'd love to learn how to do mine better. I do have one, haunted locations. It's at Chaz of the Dead. Go check it out. Great TikToks over there. Um, but it's secondary. It's about going on and having these experiences and being open to the experience. If you're not even open to the investigation period, then you're already not open to, you're not going to be as open as you would be to actual experiences. So
Yeah.
it's again baby steps though. I don't want to come in here and bitch, but because it is a large, big steps I think forward that really the community's been struggling to make for decades. Huge strides in ufology just from recognition standpoints, right? I think the Calvin photograph everyone's been talking about, it's a good example of that. It's a shit photograph, really blurry, really old. But 10 years ago, that professor would have been laughed out of the room. They would have been like, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, sir, you have some blurry photograph. Who cares? But nowadays, there's this in-depth discussion and people are celebrating it as, phenomenal evidence and things like that. And whether it is or not, seeing that change of opinion is wild because it's been quick. It's literally been a decade. I can think back to when I was a teenager, again, working on these subjects as more of a hobby, where people were like, oh,
Yeah.
that's weird. UFOs, craziness, that's sure, whatever, UFOs. And now it's the opposite. It's, I can go to dinner with my grandfather and he'll be like, so what do you think these UFOs are? I saw
Yeah.
on Fox News. And,
Yeah.
they'll actually have that conversation now. And I think that's a huge first step. And, the second step, it follows naturally because people become interested in these subjects once they know they're real. They research the subjects, and if they do it earnestly and they do it through the right mediums, and they don't fall into a religious echo chamber or an exopolitics echo chamber. They hit the researchers, your Jacques Vallée's, your J. Allen Hynek's, and
Yeah.
they consume the information. Then they'll land where I'm at. They'll be like, yeah, something else is going on. No, it's
Yeah.
not just aliens. There's some reality fuckery is going on here. It's something beyond. And yeah, I've seen it with people who've never done psychedelics before, but they've researched and done so much information, they land where I'm at, where they're like, oh yeah, it definitely has something to do with consciousness. I've never done a drug in my life, but it's definitely, you're right. You're onto something. And it is, it's available to us in a way where it hasn't been before. We don't have the censorship of religion. We do to an extent. If you've ever been to the occult section at your local bookstore and seen it filled with Jesus saves me and how to connect
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
Christ, and it's rough. It's rough out there competing against all of that. But it's all of that stuff it's antiquated. It's not. It's doing its best it can to keep up with the times. But in the vast sea of information, those religious arguments when it comes to paranormal stuff very quickly get drowned out by, logical people, by people like Hynek, by researchers like I'm reading Mike Dash right now. He was an editor for the 14 Times. It's his book Borderlands. It's a master class on paranormal phenomenon. It's phenomenal. It's again this higher understanding and recognizing which factors are hoaxed, but where hoaxes generate from and these beliefs and ideas generate from. And it's crazy. It is. I do think it'll be something that even towards the end of my lifetime, we'll see being ufology it'll be like an elective at your university. It'll be
Yeah.
something where we're going to be studying it with actual science and not just shouting demon every time something spooks you out.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, man. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing just this history of this place that you actually want to get saved. You want it to be uh protected so that it's not destroyed or anything like that because like you said, you can learn from areas like that or
Yeah,
just look at it. It's a great piece of
yeah.
history nonetheless.
And it's already in this cultural park where you have the Ribault. It's situated between the Ribault Club and the Kingsley Plantation. It's already they have this third landmark that could revitalize this park, revitalize this area, just sitting there dilapidated because no one knows what's going on. I tried after failing to get permission several times. I tried to simply find out who's in charge, like who's running it. Like, how can I have is there someone I can sit down and have a conversation with? And no one seems to know. No one at the Park Service. It's kind of been lost to this massive bureaucracy. No one knows whose jurisdiction the house falls under. They eventually gave me an email address to an office in Tallahassee, which I never heard back from. And so,
Mm.
yeah, this is the next step. I'm, not a politician or a lawyer in any means, um, but I felt that it was, my duty in some sense to get this place recognized. And even part of it was going back on a repeated basis and seeing that some people had visited in the interim between when I was out there, and they spray painted some half-baked political slogans and stuff on the front. And again, on the stone face of a castle, they're painting wild nonsense.
Yeah.
Blondes have more fun and shit like that. And I love graffiti and I love art, and I actually think it would be a great if they were to renovate the house, but preserve one room with all of the graffiti. Don't change any of it.
Hmm.
I think that would be an interesting exhibit in itself. Um, but it's a it's rough to see something like that degrade in front of your eyes. And I only knew it as this, I've only seen it in person as this already kind of destroyed structure. And visiting and seeing just the slightest more destruction on it, I was like, oh man, fuck. Like, it pissed me off. And that was kind of like, well, shit, if I feel that way about some new spray paint, then you know this this is something worthwhile. This is something that needs to be recognized, and I'm sure other people would feel that way too. So sign the
Well,
petition.
yeah.
go
I'll
go to
have the
the
link.
description, click it, sign it. Takes only a minute. And yeah, if you're Florida based, call your congressman. Say, have you heard of the Betz House? Let's get this place recognized. Those are the best ways at this point we can get it recognized. If we can get enough petitions and get it that landmark status, then we can start doing benefits and raising money and start saving and preserving this house actually. But the first step is getting it the recognition and getting the story out there. And if you do want the full story, check out the book, A Place Between Time and Space. It's a true story of UFOs, ghosts, and Florida's strangest home. It's available on Amazon and through paranormalitymag.com. So go check it out.
Yeah, and I can attest that I've got your last book. It was good, so I can let the people know, like, get the book. Just do it.
Yeah, it's a labor of love. I definitely dump a lot of research and weird stories in there. So if you like any of the things I talked about today, go check it out. And yeah, check out that first book too. It's getting a second edition this winter.
Oh, dope.
So quick, scramble, get your first editions
Yeah.
now. They'll be collector items one day.
And
Um,
now, where can everybody find you so they can
yeah,
find
you
all
can
your
find
links?
me on all the social medias at Chaz of the Dead, yeah, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. You can find all of my work at chazofthedead.com, links to podcast appearances, my books, my Patreon, and the articles I write for Paranormality Magazine. Go check them out. I'm actually going to be on the cover of September next month talking about this petition and this project.
Nice.
And you can also come see me in October giving a lecture about the Betz case at the North Florida Paracon in Tallahassee. So if you're in that area, come stop by, come listen to some weird stories. We'll smoke a doobie and hang out. Yeah, appreciate you for having me on, man. As always, a blast chatting and
Yeah, of
sharing
course.
strange.
Yeah, of course. Now, for everybody watching and listening, I'll end it with my little spiel here. Don't forget to ask questions and face your fears. Thanks for joining me and Chaz on this episode of Induced Fear. Bye, guys.